Hey everyone, thanks for joining us, and yeah, excited to have you all on here virtually as part of our Startup Grind virtual event series. So basically, Startup Grind, if you're not familiar, it's a large one of the larger event organizations for startups, and it's become now it's become a startup platform connecting 2 million entrepreneurs worldwide. Started out in Silicon Valley about 10 years ago and expanded to 500 different chapters around the world. And now there's a new like startup program as well for memberships to and being part of like an online community with access to different investor networks and as well as partner programs and other channels as well that launched about a week or so ago. So yeah, if you haven't heard about it already, we'll be sharing some more information with that and in some of our upcoming newsletters. But yeah, basically under normal circumstances, we host localized Boston events at least once a month, and through COVID now we've been doing virtual webinars about every 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks or so. So, excited to continue the programming here and yeah, bring you our event on bootstrapping your startup success. And yeah, if any time throughout the chat you guys have questions or comments, there's a chat box on the side as well as a Q&A form, and we'll be monitoring both to yeah, ask your questions to our panel of speakers here. So yeah, excited to bring up our panelists to the stage, and yeah, I guess Stephan, if you want to start with your introduction and background, and yeah, we'll go from there.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, first of all, Jason and Jeff, for having me here. I'm really excited, and it's nice to see a familiar face on the panel. Sankeetha, hello to you as well, and everybody else listening. So myself, I'm based as well here in Boston. Consider myself a global entrepreneur, have started 6 companies, 3 I talk about and 3 not so much. And I think that's kind of both sides we're going to talk about today. I am today running a company called the Human Innovation Garage since almost a decade, actually, at this point. And we mostly focus on entrepreneurs, senior leaders, and senior executives, particularly also on the C-level, executive level, where we are merging on the talent optimization side, really, how do we align business strategy to talent strategy? Because particularly in this day and age with COVID playbook, putting brand new rules into the new normal has become for us a big part as people transition, as people adjust to remote work, and as people just dealing with their own fear and anxieties around the subject of COVID, but also what is the direction of the companies going into. Everything else, all the accolades and everything else, I'll leave it out. You'll find it on my LinkedIn profile, and glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. And yeah, Sankeetha, would love to hear your background and introduction as well.
Sankeetha Selvarajah. I'm a corporate attorney here in New York and in Massachusetts as well. I started a law firm in 2009, and through mergers and also starting another one, this is my 4th startup. And I practice law as also I'm part of a business ed tech company as well, and we also provide advisory services. I've come a long way, a winding way of being a lawyer, a consultant, and advisor as well. So it's been an interesting journey from all ends. So I'm excited to be on this panel as well with familiar faces and new ones as well. So thanks for having me.
And yeah, just to, introduction or to sort of start things off here, both of you guys have been involved in several different companies leading to where you are now. So like, what sort of got you into entrepreneurship and starting a business in the first place? Yeah, I guess whoever wants to start and take it, and then both of you guys can jump in.
Ladies first.
Sure. So I was right out of law school, and I went to DC to work as well. Came back to Massachusetts to take the Massachusetts bar, while I was waiting for the bar results, which take anywhere from 4 to 5 months to come in, not exactly someone that sits around. So I started a company with a co-founder of mine. She is an IP attorney. So we started a company, a law firm that serviced only startups and small businesses. So back in 2009, that was pretty rare actually. And all we did was service companies, that's it. So we didn't do family law, we didn't do criminal, it was very, very business transactional. A couple of years later, we merged with another law firm, and I stayed with that law firm for another 2 years. And then in 2013, I started this version of that law firm, and that's the one that I've been running for quite some time now. I think it's going to be 7 years now. And then 2 years ago, I started a company called Biz2Co, where we were basically trying to aid CEOs into creating profitable companies. So anything from masterclasses to contract templates or anything on that realm to really, really shift the thinking from growing a company to creating a profitable company and scaling to that level. And that's how it started. And along the way, I've been an advisor, a mentor, and general legal therapist, it seems, unwilling, okay, to many startups, okay.
There's the word, therapist.
Legal therapy.
So my story is essentially very similar. So I came, wow, almost 30 years ago, very traditionally trained in hospitality, luxury hospitality, high-end premium hospitality, predominantly hotels, to the United States for a hotel company, which many of you know is Ritz-Carlton Hotels, and learned everything from total quality management to Six Sigma at Ritz-Carlton. And then did the traveling with Ritz-Carlton for a bit and came back to Boston, which was my initial welcome to the United States with 2 suitcases and a backpack. Later in the 90s, then I was working in a hotel in New York, the Waldorf Astoria, as a hotel manager. And I think I was right on that urge of burnout. And I think when you get into, and here's, the word to the wise to everybody listening who's an entrepreneur, I got to this point of saying, my pleasure, certainly go damn get it yourself. And that really was kind of the point where I knew I had kind of reached my point in hospitality where I needed to go somewhere else and do something else and get connected with 2 guys on the dark side of technology. And we built in the late 97, early 98, we built one of the first SaaS. At that point, we called it ASP, Application Service Provider, which now is Service as a Software Platform, obviously, or PaaS as people refer to it now, learning management systems. One of the things which was one of the biggest lessons for us in building that first company was, we thought we knew everything and we realized very quickly we didn't know anything. I think the second part was we have a third panelist coming on here. The dog's joining us. That's awesome. Love it. What kind of dog is it?
Australian Shepherd.
Oh my God, beautiful. And so we learned very quickly that we had to make a decision of are we going to be a platform or are we going to be a content provider? And for us as a young business, it was very, very clear that it's much too expensive for us to be a content company because we couldn't afford it. We were very lucky to find a generous lawyer at Goodwin Procter and Hoare at that time. Now it's Goodwin Procter, who was a partner in the labor relations division and who's still there today, who took us on as his baby, so to speak, and helped us produce content for sexual harassment, discrimination, and then later diversity. And that was kind of our breakthrough. Which then brought us into learning, brought us into e-learning. We then emanate that company in 2006 to an Italian company called Giunti Editore, which was just outside of Florence. So besides that, it made for fabulous traveling to Italy, in Sesto Levante, which also was an office, which was an old monastery, which was absolutely unheard of and magnificent. It also really brought me to the point of embracing how impacting or how education can impact people nationally, globally, in any context, and really kind of shift people in terms of their social standings from being in a very poor social ranking to potentially becoming very influential. And that kind of really peaked for me in 2007, 2008, when we started the Open Content Learning Company in India, where we then really federated and built a federated search engine into 265 institutions, which one of them being MIT, Stanford, being Carnegie Mellon, being Johns Hopkins, which the three of them, MIT, Johns Hopkins, and Carnegie Mellon, being the first three to be funded by the Hewlett Foundation at the time with open content resources and what we refer to today still as open content and open educational resources and MOOCs, which companies like Udemy, Coursera, and others operate under, also some of their licensing. And that brought us, then to building a platform which was really so impactful, where we then delivered on a tablet in India content to institutions, which really changed lives. And that was probably the biggest success. And the constant theme for me was really always people. I was good in putting people together. I enjoyed the interaction with people, which then when in 2012, 5 years after running that company as president and CEO, I very quickly got to a point where I literally, I walked out on a Friday and I said, Monday, I'm not coming back. That had a lot to do with board and investor relations. And that brought me to the Human Innovation Garage, which again, the theme was, how do I take talents I have where I'm good at, bring that to the table, and then really serve and support, as I explained earlier, executives, entrepreneurs, CEOs, not so much from I think we need to make a distinction between being a mentor and a coach. Mentorship is a wonderful thing I tremendously enjoy, but the reality is high accountability, also, pay to play, that's coaching. And we just gotta have to acknowledge that. That's really has brought me today here, where today we're focusing on the whole gamut from talent strategy to business strategy, how to align the two of them, and how to really help people not to be square pegs to be fit in the round hole, but complementing people in their strength and helping them identify what is really the appropriate path for them.
Sorry, I had to turn the microphone back on. Yeah, so both of you guys have, great stories here, and, we can tackle this, I guess, first from your own companies, and then we can dive into, like, you both work with startups now as well, and have stories from some of the companies you work with. So I guess the first question here is, like, in launching your recent, or the companies you guys have now, like, what did it take, or how long did it take, and what were the steps from coming up with the initial idea to actually first, promoting that you have this business, and then, taking it from there to going out and starting to either build or get customers? Yeah, what did that process look like? Yeah, I guess Sankeetha, if you want to start.
Sure. And Stephen, just jump in here too, because like I said, me and Stephan always mess it out to go back and forth. We've had heated coffee discussions about many topics. Okay. Right. So when we first started the law firm, well, we didn't have to do or obtain any legal, because we were the legal. Okay. So we helped subsidized a lot, let's just put it that way. Right. Okay, but we were definitely a niche practice. So in getting that out and actually saying this is all we service, that was more of an endeavor than anything else. So either teaching or either connecting with other like-minded organizations. CIC just had come out at that time, Venture Cafe, a lot of the smaller programs such as Women Who Code, tech, as well as, so there was many of those back in the day, and they just slowly morphed as it did. And again, my co-founder was an IP attorney, intellectual property attorney, so she did the trademarks, copyrights, the soft IP. And then and I just did the corporate side of it. So anything incorporation all the way to exit, which is M&A, mergers and acquisitions. And so we spent a lot of that. We were semi-virtual at that time too, just because we weren't litigators. So we weren't tied to court dates at that time. And also when we merged with another law firm, they gave us a greater platform as well to really, really launch and really reach a lot more people. So the partnership helped. So if we're talking in a bootstrap sense, finding great partners and finding good people for your team can kind of multiply your effect there. And that's what worked for us. Again, we're a law firm, not your typical, startup, but what we were doing, we're servicing startups. So in a way, we were a law firm startup. Okay. And so we got to really kind of learn on the job. We already knew the legal side, and we were now learning how to assist a very disruptive portion of the community, right? The ones that were coming up with disruptive ideas and needed to make it legal, okay, and also grow the business as well too. So generally the two questions that we normally asked is, can it be done, right? Can this idea really come to fruition? The second one is it legal? And usually the second question tripped up a lot of people, okay? So we had to make that happen, or find a solution, or basically find a loophole that would make it work, because what we found was law was 5 years behind typical business principles. So we had to work it together. Yeah. So it was a great, and it still is a great stimulating time to be an attorney in this area.
Great. Yeah, and Stephan, yeah, we'd love to hear your side of the
So
story.
I think the advice that I always tell people is start building your company at the beginning the way like you're already a big firm or a big company, because I think I think COVID, as sad as it is for many families and for people, I think COVID is actually a great gift for entrepreneurs. Particularly, I think there's a big difference if you're an entrepreneur like Sankeetha and I, who are not on our first go around, and you mature, but you also your ideas and the way ideas build on the prior idea, they just kind of they matriculate differently. The gift of COVID, why I'm saying that, is this. When we started our first company, and I openly admit this, the coolest thing we had was probably one of the sexiest conference rooms in the downstairs building in an office building in Danvers, with the TV coming down from the ceiling, and we needed to have every Mickey Mouse toy there was in. Now we got very, very lucky. We didn't take any investment. We survived ourselves. We literally bootstrapped it. But the gift of COVID is a gift because the discussion of, are you going to get an office space? Are you going to work virtual? Should be not even a discussion right now. So a lot of companies, and I'd love to hear, Sankeetha, you probably see it with a lot of companies. Bootstrapping is all about the cash you have available to survive and make the business survive until you get to a point where it even makes sense to take money. Because here's the problem. When you take money too early, you dilute yourself like crazy. You have somebody else very, very quickly make yourself no illusions about it. The moment you bring investors into a company, suddenly you're working for someone else. And third, then longer you can bootstrap it, and then longer you can hold on to your own boots, so to speak, and finance it out of even friends and family in a very sensible manner in that respect, which, as far as I would push it in this context, it is just an immense and dramatic advantage in the negotiating position you have once you start creating value, if that's in the sense of a trademark, if the sense of a copyright, a patent, if you want to go that far, or other technology that is defendable. So, and I'm going to stop here because I'm sure, Sankeetha, you probably got some things to say to that, which
I'm going to echo you.
That was always a big part of it.
I'm actually going to echo you. So, you touched upon a great point, the fact that if you take money too early, you dilute many things. Actually, you dilute innovation in many ways. Okay. Yep. There's a certain scrappiness the certain innovation that comes out of being scrappy. There's a certain desperation that fuels that. Okay. There's also, this is a great time to really just, if we're going to piggyback off of COVID, it's a great time to be innovative and throw the proverbial spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks, right? And just see let's try it. So really great companies come out of really bad failed attempts. Yeah. Okay, because usually they learn from their mistakes, they tweak it, and so forth. And sometimes when I tell clients, I was like, I want you to fail so spectacularly that it creates a successful product, in the sense that it just shows me that they've tried different ways, and they're not afraid to push the needle in many ways, right? So, and also if we're talking about real capital, is to actually own your own email list, own your own, income and your own revenue before you take any outside investment. So basically the idea is to be fully sufficient, or somewhat 75 to 80% sufficient and self-sufficient before you even take any capital. Because at that point you're expanding to grow rather than just to, start.
I think that's a great point. I think that's a great point, because what I often tell young entrepreneurs when they ask me, and it's not a space I work a lot in, but it's that choice, right? Where you say, you know what, we can continue growing slowly, but there is a cost of opportunity, and the cost of opportunity, we're going to take some investment, which allows us to grow so much faster, to take market share, or just push the competition out, or use the money to acquire potentially a competitor, whatever that may be. But I think I totally agree there that that's really where I see a lot of the smart money going, versus just being lazy money to say, well, you know, I want to pay myself $100,000 as quickly as possible. Well, that's bullshit, because nobody who is an investor in their right mind after a short amount of time will say, well, that's really good. And that's most likely not the company which is going to survive.
And you said like a really key term here, which is smart money, right? So if you're taking any sort of investor money, and we always do the 4-part equity test here, and I always talk about it, and I vomit this on people all the time, where I say, if you're going to take any money, the first step is time. What is that potential investor going to give beyond the monetary investment? So the first step is time. How much time are they going to give you beyond, you know, the quarterly check-in, right? And then resources. Do they have specific resources such as a database or a connection or something of that nature that can grow your revenue base or your foundation? And then the third one is skill set. Skill set is what else is there? The last one is money, because it's cheap. Once it's gone, the value runs out, right? So anybody taking any sort of investment has to have 3 out of those 4: time, resources, skill set, and money before you should even consider doing that. But before you even take any money, you should also have a plan for what you're going to do with that money once you receive it. It's not like, oh, we need to, you know, just have it in the rainy day fund. That's not the job of investments, okay? That's really more of the job of progressive thinking and growth. So I think a lot of people also take money because they think it's free, but absolutely nothing in this world is free, okay?
It's not. It's not.
So how do you comparing, or I guess, you know, there's companies that are, you know, sort of less technical, launching, you know, their main goal or the main thing they're showcasing to investors is like, you know, it's quickly scalable and they're looking to just take market share, versus there's companies that are more technical, and like patents are a key component, you know, the IP is a key driver of it. So I guess the question that gets asked a lot is like, if there's companies that are going out, or there's companies that are looking to get patents in order to fundraise, and then but they also need funding in order to file IP, like where does that, how do you advise those type of companies in order to sort of make sure they're protected, but also have enough in place to go out and convince people to come on board, whether it's investors or, you know, start marketing your company and getting early customers involved?
So honestly, if you already have existing IP that's unprotected, the idea is to start protecting it early, because that process is long. So you want to start that process early. However, it still comes down to, what are you going to do with it? Okay, right. Are you going to license it? Are you going to execute as part of your current offerings? Or are you going to hold on to it and use it as part of your sale, as a negotiating point, right? So there has to be an actual usage of your assets, which is what IP is. And when you're talking to future investors, they're going to ask about these assets, on top of looking at your leadership as a CEO as to how you're going to lead with those assets as well too. You know, I myself, you know, a product is great, but honestly, a product is really, really marginal compared to the team that leads it. For me, like on it, 75%, the team.
100%, and I think that's the key point, and I'm so glad you said that. Everybody here, I mean, make yourself no illusions. You can have most investors. So I'm on the angel list myself. So most investors, we will invest into a B market, maybe a B product, but never in a B team, ever.
Facts.
We will invest into an A team and a B product and a B market. We will invest into a team, a market, and a B product, but never in an A market, an A product, and a B team, ever. It's not going to happen.
Can I also say this as the lawyer? People are liabilities too, okay? And people forget that, okay? It all comes in all different values and all different types. They are definitely the troublemaker on your team might be the great person that always pushes back and gives you the best ideas, right? Think about it like that. It's perspective, right? But the troublemaker that's preventing progress and not willing to listen to reason, let's take a beat. Consider them. Okay.
Well, I think the other piece is, I mean, let's talk about, you know, maybe some principles of, we're a young team, we started together, and what happens and what needs to happen. Because I think we talk on one side about virtual office, but the other thing is, which I think is so important, you know, there's a lot of brilliant jackasses out there. And if you build high performance culture, you don't want a brilliant jackass necessarily on your team. He or she may be the only one who can code this thing, but guarantee you talk liability, I talk, they're going to destroy the team in the first round where they get money and hire people because they don't know what to do with people. So it's a huge conversation we're actually having with some venture capital groups in terms of how can we help people to see that they may be investing in something which becomes that liability, exactly what you talk about, Sankeetha. And I think the alignment, the clarity, the periodical check-in, that everybody's aligned. You know, we may start, I mean, writing a business plan, when I started my first company was a big thing. Then in between, people said, forget the business plan, you don't need to write it anymore. And now we're kind of back to writing somewhat of a business plan. But here's the reality. It's like a little boat you put on the public garden on the water. The moment you let your hands off this little boat, you have no clue where this thing is going to go. And you just hope it's not going to sink. But just be prepared to lean in depending on where the wind comes from. And you need the whole team to lean in the right way. And at the same time, on whatever that means, whoever's a sailor, I'm not, as you can tell. But whatever that means is exactly, you know, that's just what you need to do. Because whatever you project today, your business is going to look totally different in a year or 2 or 3 from now. And that may be all kinds of different reasons. So I think that's a big, big part, you know, where taking chances is a great thing, but there needs to be alignment. I think that's an important part.
And touching on your point about business plans, you know, it's kind of like a trendy thing. Either it's in or it's out, right? And the fact is, like, I myself don't try to read any business plans longer than 10 pages, just because if you can't summarize your goals and your projections in less than 10 pages, that means you spent more time on the business plan rather than the actual product. Okay, that concerns me. Okay, the next part is also, the fact is that you really have to treat your business plan, even putting it down to a simple executive summary, as a living business plan, you know, and checking in with it every like 3 to 6 months and tweaking it. It actually lives life, like business is fluid. So you want to move along with it. And it's exactly what you said too. You want a team that pivots together. You know, even if you have situations that happen, when we actually have people come into our office to form a partnership or any type of company with more than 2 people, we actually ask them to do a 30-question questionnaire first about their partnerships and how well they know their partners, how well they handle conflict, how well, you know, how long have they known them? Do they trust them? You know, have they worked together before? Okay, and if I always say this, if 10 sets of partners come in, only 7 go on to create that company. Because the other
right, and I think one of the things what I talk a lot, even with more mature companies, as people go through their first round, second round, I'm working with a company right now. There's 2 founders, which are left over from the original team of 3, and both of them are now coming into the position of having children, and completely changes the risk profile of somebody who is a founder, a CEO, whichever C-level they're at, because priorities shift. I remember when my daughter was born, it completely changes your priorities, and the things you thought were important, they're suddenly really not important. And it changes your risk profile, it changes your priorities, it changes everything from the level of patience you suddenly have versus you didn't have before, to the other extreme where there are certain intolerances you would never put up with suddenly. So it kind of goes both ways, but I think it's important to understand that. And to your point of the questionnaire, for me to understand that if we found a company together, Jason, you and I, that, you know, you got $5 million in the bank and I got nothing, I think that's important we talk about that, because your attitude towards having the bite and having the bootstrapping attitude is very different than mine, because I need to make a paycheck today. And so there just need to be some agreements which are not gentleman agreements. And I think that's the other piece where founders get very naive, I think, about, oh yeah, we will work that out when we make our first money. Well, guess what? When you make that first money, that conversation is not going to be pretty anymore. That conversation is easy when you have no money and there is kind of an even playground.
Right.
But the moment there's money in play, it gets ugly.
No, I
And
think
the
it's
irony is, go ahead, sorry.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I think it's an important topic, and like, I like the idea of sort of doing some of the whether it's a survey or other ways to figure a lot of this out up front.
Yep.
And yeah, I guess the question, it's sort of I think it's sort of a balance too, and would love your take on like how you go about figuring out, you definitely want alignment of the team members towards the same goal, but you also, need to have a balance of different ideas coming in and different perspectives on everything you're working towards. So, how do you manage building out a team that sort of fits both profiles there?
Go ahead.
Sorry, I think there's really two pieces which we need to address. I think one is, who are you as a human being and what's your value system? And the other piece is, when you say goal, what is the impact that the company is looking to create? What's the why of the business? And I think we need to really separate those two. And I'm going to pass it over to you, Sankeetha, there. But I think to me that's an important component, because you can't talk one without the other. If I don't feel certain core values of the other individual which match mine, already there is going to be a complete disconnect.
I agree. I mean, people run their businesses the way they run their personal lives, and not many people have full control over their own personal lives, right? And it definitely bleeds over into how they run business. And, Stephen, you touched on this before, where you say the best time to come to an agreement is when you have no money, because at that point, you're not really fighting for anything at this point, right? And keep in mind, business is still interpersonal relationships, which are still built on open and honest communication every step of the way. It just doesn't happen in the beginning when you're doing a questionnaire. It happens when one founder is disgruntled, when one founder feels like their expectations aren't met, which is usually when that happens. That's a big key, when somebody doesn't feel that they're compensated enough or valued enough. And those conversations need to happen very quickly. And honestly, if you have to build it into your calendar, even like a monthly check-in, even like a happy hour, whatever it is, to have those conversations and say, hey, because here's another thing, a closed mouth doesn't get fed either, right? So if you're not saying anything that you feel slighted in some way or in your own arrangement, it's up to you. It's really up to you to also be a grown adult and an active co-founder in your company as well too. So all of these are, these are free, okay?
Yep.
These are free concepts, right? Human relationships are free concepts. Okay? You don't need any money for this, but sometimes it can be the most expensive results. So
I think, I think the other thing which I see a lot of founders, and I remember my first startup, we would get into this conversation, and I will never ever forget it. One of my co-founders said to me, and I don't know if somebody else told it to him, and I'm going to say it as it is on this webcast. He said to me, shit of shit is shit. And here's why.
Okay.
A lot of co-founders get into these fights over, I want to own 51% and I want 49%. Listen, dude, you got nothing right now. There's nothing. Zero. The company has no value. We're arguing over something where there's nothing there. And when it's more than two founders, co-founders is easy, because you can say 51, 49, 50, 50, whichever way it is, which is not always the ideal structure for different reasons. But let's just hypothetically say that's the way they want to live and coexist. The moment you have 3 or 4 or 5, or you start distributing equity and bring people in exchange for equity, the whole thing changes. And it goes back to, at the very core, we're all little kids, and we all want to matter. We want to be acknowledged. And as a lesson of leadership, servant leadership is, listen, guys, who are the CEOs and the people who are starting companies, who have people working for them, with them, first off, change from for to with. They work with you. It's a much better way to think of people. And the second piece is, people want to be acknowledged. An empathetic conversation, which goes back to, the happy hour where you sit down together. It doesn't matter if there's a glass of wine involved or not. Again, I'm not trying to push alcohol, but the point is, people level at those moments with each other. There's a relax, there's a tune down, there's a coffee chat, there's a way to look at things with a more emotional lens. And it's very, very important that I can relate with somebody and say, hey, listen, I get it. I've been there. I empathize with you, versus kind of the compassionate piece, which is like, okay, I'm on the other side here and I'm watching it happen, but I really have nothing to do with it. I'm an audience versus and a spectator versus actually a participant. And being able to level from a participant perspective, I think that's a big part how people build relationships and how people build trust, right? Because it always goes from how do I, from a co-creative standpoint, how do I go from I to we? There is nothing what makes me more crazy when I talk to a medium-sized company and the CEO always talks about I. I mean, that's like all flags go off. And it talks about who this person is. It talks about, you know, we all have narcissistic traits, and we can talk about that separately. And that's the piece where I think we, from a standpoint of serving, supporting young entrepreneurs, the stewardship we need to exercise as the generation who's been there once or twice or more. I think that's a huge responsibility. So that's where mentorship, accountability, coaching, and everything else can certainly come in. And organizations like Startup Grind, which is why we're here. I mean, that's what it is. You know, if somebody falls on their face, watch why they fell, because that's the greatest learning lesson. It's why make the same mistake as they made. So let's really carefully analyze what it is, because failures, we don't really talk about it. We talk about, oh wow, look at this great success. Well, that's bullshit, because they fell 35 times on their fucking face before they had one success. And the point is, I just got the eye roll from Sankeetha. I may say the word again. But we don't look at it. We don't disassemble that and say, but let's really understand why they fell on their face. Let's understand it. Let's dissect it. Let's help people see what the reason for that was. And that's really where time is well spent, rather than just celebrating the successes, because that's 1 in 1,000 versus looking at the 999 others, which will help maybe make that 1 in 1,000, 2 or 3 in 1,000. And it's all a question of probability.
Right. Can I also say, like, for if we're really on startup tools here and startup grind here about bootstrapping, I think people really need to spend a lot of time on their time. It's our greatest asset and our biggest enemy, right? And so every moment of your time should be spent on $10,000 hour moves, okay? Not the $10 administrative moves when you think about it. So you want to see how each of your hours are spent in creating, expanding, growing your actual company, your actual product, your actual service. So that in the creation start is really the $10,000 movement, right? How is this bringing revenue? How is this creating a better product? How is this creating a better customer service or customer experience, right? Then the second thing that you should really focus on is building out your team. Right now, it could be just you and your co-founder, but I'm also talking about your digital team. What kind of apps you're using to automate or delegate? What about your VA, virtual assistant? You can get some for about $5 to $10 an hour. So this is where it frees up your time to actually spend time on the $10,000 hours, okay? So really understanding your value as a founder and what that is as a CEO and where your value really lies is a great asset too. And then the external team is your service provider. There's a question about, you know, your attorney and accountant. Absolutely, those are part of your team, especially Stephan touched on this about a mentor. So, you know, an accountant is your finance guy or gal is probably your #1 service provider you want to engage with. Okay, so if you're going to spend any money, it's on the finance. Okay, it's on the person that's going to help you with the taxes or give you some financial planning or progressive thinking about that. Then after, it's the lawyer. Okay, then and throughout all of this should be any source of mentors in any fashion as well. Okay, before you get into the insurance. And don't skimp on systems. There's a beauty in systems, because the repetitive nature of systems is also something that you can automate or have in place, such as standard operating procedures, to say even a Trello board, or even something like we do this thing 17 times. Guess what? You just have to automate it or have a system in place that handles it on the back end. again, you want to free up that time for number one, which is your time, your $10,000 hour time. Okay, that's startup.
Wow. I mean, I think that's such great advice. One of the things I do with clients, very, very senior clients, is we draw an X and a Y axle. And we draw, and the X axle is return of investment and the Y is fun. And if you look at exactly to your point where a lot of people hang out, they either hang out where there's no return of investment, but a lot of fun because it just is easy and that's what they love doing. It does nothing for the business, or they hang out on the side where, or they don't do the stuff where there is, not a lot of fun and no return of investment, which is exactly the stuff we want to delegate, virtual assistant, et cetera, et cetera. I have clients, they have 5 virtual assistants, one for social media, one for email marketing, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just the way to do it. And as you said, the cost of it and the proportionate return of investment is so significant. And that's the way I think exactly you want to take a look at it, and at your business and engineer it.
I get a lot of.
We lost you there for a moment.
Faded out for a second.
Is that better?
We can hear you, but we can't see you.
Well, I'm here.
Okay. Now we can see you.
Okay, so I think the question I get is, should I spend the money counted? Should I? Yes. Okay. I do think that you should spend the money on an accountant and a lawyer. Like I said, accountant first and then lawyer soon after. A lawyer is triggered this at the same time that obligations for a contract triggered. Because use this test. If you are creating a debt or an obligation to another person or an entity, that triggers a contract. Okay, at that time, that also triggers a lawyer. Now, we all know you can get a contract off of LegalZoom or anything online or so forth, right? But think about the greater investment that you can make if you engage a lawyer at that time to create that contract or review a current contract that you have, because that investment of, I don't know, $300 to $500 that you spend on the actual attorney can actually give you a
Great. Yeah, we had I think that ties in, or want to tie in a couple of the audience questions into that. Like on the legal side, I guess, you have your sort of backing up from, where we started on this, you have your team in place, you're ready to get started, and, now you have your accountant and lawyer in place too. How do you figure out if your type of companies, like, basically they said, like, this is from Anna, basically all the books say to incorporate in Delaware. Her accountant was telling her might be good for an LLC in Massachusetts. Like, what's the process of figuring out what structure is the best for your type of company?
Okay, so let me just say this, that this seminar, my contribution to the seminar is completely for educational purposes and does not constitute legal advice. Sorry, disclaimer. Okay, but do have to tell you that this is a conversation to be had with your accountant as well as your lawyer. I'm just being very clear with that because of the fact that legal, tax, and business it's like a triplicate. So one decision in one area has a domino effect on the other two. So in that being said, so having a conversation as to where your current tax landscape is going to be, what you're going to do in the next 2 to 3 years with your company will decide what state you're going to incorporate in, what type of sector you're currently in. Are you in tech? Are you going to do interstate commerce in the next, 18 to 36 months? Are you going to look for capital investment in the next 18 to 36 months? So those type of factors come into play, but rather than just picking the sexy state of Delaware to incorporate, okay? You've got to pass the Delaware test here. There's no point, because even if you file there, guess what? It's called Taxachusetts for a reason. Massachusetts is still going to want their take, especially if you have a principal place of business here, okay? So just be sure that this is why you got to talk to your accountant, then talk to your attorney about what they recommend would be the best state for you for not just now, but for the next 18 to 36 months, right? Because if you're not going to be doing much for the next, 2 to 3 years, but building your product, okay, and you're basically in a latent phase before you get to actual, round one or the beta phase, or you're actually putting it out to customers, you might want to stay in the state that you're currently in, okay, until you sort it. And this type of incorporation, it can be converted. So you can convert from one state of corporation to another state. But again, it requires, don't do anything of that nature unless you already consult with your accountant and your attorney. Like, don't wake up on a random Saturday and be like, let's go to Delaware. That's never a good thing. Okay. Not without a conversation. Okay. So this is where your team has to be used as a profit tool as well.
Yeah. And I think the other part is, also know you can convert from an LLC into an S corp, et cetera, which there's different. I'm sorry.
It's a lot more paperwork. That's all.
But that's the point why I'm saying maybe, particularly if you have the right conversation with the right people in context of your tax attorney, your lawyer, as well as, and tax attorneys and your lawyer, business attorney are not always the same people. They shouldn't be the same people for that matter, because they specialize. And your accountant, probably when you set up your business and you really are onto something, these are the 3 most important people you want to talk to and you don't want to save any money on. Because trust me, I've been on the good side of that and I've been on the very bad side of that not too long ago. And it cost me a lot of money. Because I had somebody who I thought had my back, which was an accountant, and it was just one big disaster. And partially my own fault, but to a large extent, you hope that you have somebody who is an advisor to you, which is not just the guy or the girl who fills out the paperwork, but they are becoming mentors, advisors, consultants to your business in pointing out options, educating you to the point that you don't need to be the expert at it, but enough that you are able to pivot and make a decision one way or the other, and it's an educated decision. That's the important piece here.
Absolutely. That's the smart team member, right? So when you do bring on anybody that's an accountant or a lawyer, are they thinking ahead for you? Okay. So are they thinking ahead, and you have to build that rapport and tell them, be as honest as possible. You still have the confidentiality built in, but having that conversation and saying, hey, we want to take this to a multi-million-dollar company. We want to take on investors. This is the thing that we're really working on. And knowing all that, share with them your plans, because the more that they know, the better that they can assist you as well. And so in that aspect, hold your own team members accountable and say, do you have any ideas of where we can go? Is there someone that you can introduce me to? Where do you see us? How can you help us for this? It's just not a fill in the blanks type of situation where they just fill out your tax return or they just create a contract for you, right? It's a symbiotic relationship at that point. So start using them as such.
Right.
And I think another piece is to, the whole usage of people is make community a resource. The generation I grew up in, we were told, go figure it out. We had a question, well, we had nobody to ask because people didn't want to hear about my problems and about the things I didn't know. They wanted to hear about what I knew, and it was not that attractive to ask people for help because it showed weakness. That's the generation I grew up in. Today, if you're in the younger generation, so 30 and under, it's expected that you find mentors, that you find teachers, that you find stewards for your business, for other contexts, that you exercise your influence and other people's influence in the realm of your own sphere of influence, in the context of ask questions who has got a good lawyer, ask questions who's working with certain people, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a big part, because if you don't exercise your relationships and the community power and access you have in that manner, you're just stuck and you're just kind of left behind. Look who just joined us.
Hey, Arun, can you hear us?
Hey, I can. I'm sorry. There's a bunch of internet work going on here. I don't want to blame them. It's not their fault. I just lost track of time while working on the things. Sorry about that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if you want to give a quick introduction to everyone about you and Boson Motors and sort of how you got started on your company.
So Boson was founded by myself and my co-founder Suri. We both were co-workers. So we both started in 2017. We both were coworkers at Google, and we started working on this as a side project. Then we had some customers come up to us in India. They were we were making a few prototypes, and they wanted us to help them run their business deliveries. So we started making few vehicles, and 3 years we are the first road legal light truck in India, certified by the government. And we are in the pre-production, trial production. We are making 10 at a time in batch production. It's been not easy journey, I can tell you that much. It's a hardware product, so as soon as we enter a room anywhere, they shun us out. So yeah, it's been challenging, I would say.
Oh, sorry, my microphone was off. Yeah, so yeah, I think part of like the good comparison, with or the other panelists and your type of company here is, yeah, yours is a hardware product, and sort of, can you walk us through a little bit of the process? Like, how did you get this started? I know you bootstrapped early on. You just raised some funding, but how did you get the manufacturing and everything and sort of the prototyping started, from the ground up?
So we started in Fremont, basically Home Depot and Fry's based prototyping. We bought everything out of Home Depot and made our first prototype. Then we found a location in Pune in India, which is very similar to Detroit. It is an automotive hub. We took a small shop there, and we were surrounded by a whole bunch of vendors who have been in the supply chain of automotive industry. Just by interacting with them, working with them, sharing ideas, and doing multiple prototypes, we kind of burnt our hands, but also at the same time learned how to build hardware.
Great.
And fundraising, we started in October 2018. By the time we actually got our first round, it was September 2019. So it took longer than we anticipated, but our investors have been our best customers. They actually wanted to buy this product. They couldn't find in the market, so they invested in us and also are buying our product. It's a unique combination. I think we lucked out on that.
Yeah, no, that's a good scenario there. Yeah, and we'll loop everyone back in for all the questions here. Basically, we had another audience question from Norman about, so earlier in the conversation here, we were talking about basically how you need to have an A+ or an A like team in place, and he's saying, like, what if you have the great IP and plans for the application and need to hire the right people to be part of your team? Is that still attractive to investors to fund you? So yeah, I guess what does the process look? Yeah.
What's the question? The question is,
yeah,
if he has already the assets, but he's looking to build out an A team?
Yeah, he's basically sounds like, like basically a solo founder right now looking to build out his team and find the right people to make it attractive to like potential investors.
I mean, the number one is, can he work with them? That's the first thing, right? It doesn't matter if, they look attractive to investors, he's got to deal with them day to day. So, it's like a business marriage, right? You still have to figure out, you still have to show up, make coffee for them, and deal with their quote unquote crap. And so whether they have complementary skills, I think that's more than enough. Is what are his skill sets and what is he looking for? And in that, he'll build out an A team. So start at the core rather than what looks attractive to investors, because the investors can see what's working and what's not, because they're going to look at the team cohesion more than they're going to look at and how that team actually executes, right? So if you've got two great people, but they don't work well together and they literally are fighting all the time because they haven't married their sense of mission together, there's no point. There really isn't, right? So just to find out what he's looking for and what works well with what he's doing and how this will push the needle of his company vision further is really starting there. And then you will build the A team off of that.
I think that's a key point, because I think Norman is the gentleman's name who asked the question. Norman, don't build the company for your investors.
Facts.
Build it, be authentic about who you are, be authentic about what your impact is you're seeking to the world, to a particular market, whatever the product may be, and continue along the lines there. Everything else is going to fall in place. Because I think it's like, and I've become a huge believer in that, like anything else in life, we attract what we put out. If you are authentic about who you are and you're clear in your communication and you're clear in terms of what it is that you're seeking, and I'm not talking about a job advertisement for your next CTO or CFO or anything else, but just the natural attraction that a particular energy puts out, you will come across the people, if that's a forum like Startup Grind or any other networking environment or an incubator environment or whatever it may be, you will find the people, they are automatically and naturally attracted to what it is, the impact, your why. Be clear what your why is. I mean, we can beat the why to death, this horse, but it is so important. What is the context of your story? How does it relate to why you're doing what you're doing? What's the impact you're seeking? You will find the people who are going to be naturally attracted to it and to you. It's just natural chemistry in that respect. And I'm a strong believer in that.
Yeah, and then I also want to jump here. So yeah, we have a couple of minutes left here. Just want to, ask all the panelists sort of, where do you, we talked a little bit about how COVID, or earlier on, how it's affecting some businesses, but I guess like, what do you see as sort of areas of opportunity right now that basically people can come to, or, what have you seen people already coming together to create and continue to innovate? And where do you see like some areas that, we can all focus on from here?
So I can share my experience in hardware industry.
Yeah.
In our domain, when we started, we were using all American components, and we were an oddball a couple of years ago for using American components. But now that is our strength, because people are starting to move away from China, and they don't mind even if our product is slightly more expensive than a Chinese import, because it's made right here in California. So the global winds are changing, and I believe if you are positioning yourself in the right way and making things people really want to buy, I mean, it should work in your favor. I mean, that's my personal journey, or Boson's journey. I can say that much.
Okay.
I mean, this is a great time for innovation.
Yeah, you can go. Say.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you could hear me, but it's a great time for innovation, actually, and you'll really get to see the people and the companies that survive out of it, because this is the starkest way that necessity still is the mother of innovation. You see a lot of current companies right now that have had to pivot. I know it's the most overused term of COVID-19 is pivot, okay? Is you've got to change, you've got to shift and figure out how to bring in that revenue and retain your customers, right? And that's, how can you do that while still delivering the same quality of service and quality of product, or even to a different broad customer base? So this really, you got to test the mettle, and it's still happening. You're still testing the mettle of many CEOs out there. So it's a great time to innovate. I'm excited to see what happens out of this.
I would say the same thing. I think we make innovation much too complicated. Innovation is so simple. Look around yourself, what works, what doesn't work. That's the jump off point for innovation. You don't need a long process. You don't need a long, you just need to be in tune. You need to be still and look and watch and observe. That's kind of the jump off point. In our field, the biggest wish and desire and the biggest gift people can make each other, I think, is finding new ways to build trust and real ways to be trusting to each other, and have authenticity around it, and be really truthful and have integrity. Because I think more than ever before, transparency in organizations about what is the organization going to do, what's the direction the organization's going in, and what is kind of the anticipation of the employee side, which translates directly into anxiety and fear, what happens next, is more required than ever before. And that's really where I think, going to your point, you know, CEOs, we're going to learn what some CEOs are made of. And we're learning it on the good side, and we're learning it on the not so good side. And I've seen some amazing surprises of CEOs where I'm going, wow, they have such a big heart, and there is so much empathy there for their employees, and there's some truth to a human being that I've never seen before. But I've also seen the other side where the lip service of I'm going to be a compassionate leader suddenly blows into the other direction, and it becomes all about me. And it becomes very self-centered and completely disrespectful of what's in the environment of the employees. So I think if that's, you know, it's not about balance in that respect. I think it's about being yourself and you know, operating with integrity, which is not a choice. It's you either are or you're not.
And you guys all did a great job. I mean, yeah, I really appreciate, you know, you guys coming on here, and I think we've all learned a lot throughout this chat. And yeah, I just want to give you guys a couple, or basically for anybody in the audience that wants to follow along or like stay in contact, what's the best best channels or avenues to do that with all of you? So I guess, yeah, Stephan, if you want to start.
So we have 2 websites, and we have some free resources out there, just to use COVID again. Human Innovation Garage, so the human, the innovation, and the garage.com. The other website is radicalselfaware.com. There's in particular some great leadership resources out there, which apply to senior as well as to juniors in the context of leadership management. So check it out. You want to connect with me, you'll find me on there as well. I'm on social media. And Jason, thanks everybody for having me, and to all the fellow panelists, a pleasure being with you all.
Thank you. And Sankeetha?
You can find us, the law firms at Selvarajah Law PC. You'll see that at selva, SELVALAW.com. And our second edtech company is Biztico, www.biz as in zebra, to.co. And you can follow us on @Biztico and @SelvaBizLaw on IG and Facebook, where we have most of our updates as well too.
Perfect. And yeah, Arun?
So you can reach me on LinkedIn. My name is Arun Seelam, and I work at Boson Motors, bosonmotors.com, BOSONMOTORS.com. I'm active on Twitter, LinkedIn, and email. Anything works.
All
So
right,
yeah.
sounds good. And yeah, for Startup Grind, you can follow us at startupgrind.com/Boston. Our next event is going to be June 4th on the future of technology and the role of AI in business with Frederick Van Harens. And yeah, so, you know, just thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you to all of our attendees. I'd like to give a quick shout out to our sponsors, Brex, which is the first major corporate credit card for startups, as well as ShipQuid, which can help automate a lot of your sales and business development efforts. And yeah, you can also check out some of our partners and sponsors on startupgrind.com/Boston, as you know, they all are tied to the startup space and provide good resources for early stage companies. So yeah, thanks again, everyone. You guys are great.
Jason, thanks again. Good night, everyone.